So hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on case study on responses to illicit trade. Thank you for being here. This is the second webinar we have of this series. So today we're gonna have two presentations with three presenters. So first we're gonna have Olena Tregub, which is here. Thank you very much for being here. She's Executive Director of the Independent Anti-Corruption Commission, and she's going to present very, I hope, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be very interesting on Swiss-made components in Russian weaponry. And then we're going to have Kirill Babanovsky and Itze Ilievsky from the University of Kliment Ordinsky in North Macedonia, presenting on the illicit flows in the Balkan route. So two very interesting presentations. Quickly, my name is Luca Tosi Rodriguez. I should have started with this, but my name is Luca Tosi Rodriguez. I'm a PhD student at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. And regarding for the GLITSS, I'm working group 3 deputy leader that is led by Stefano Canepele, who is also my PhD supervisor. He could not make it here today, but I'm going to be moderating the discussion. So regarding the presentations, you will have around is a bit flexible. It's not very strict since we have time, but try to keep it within 15 minutes each presentations, and then we try to have a 10-minute, 15 minutes of discussions at the end. So please, if you have questions to one of the presenters, keep them for the end, write them down, and you can ask them for the Q&A session that will be at the end. So I think I introduced you, so maybe we can start with Olena.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me fine?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. I'd like to show you a presentation. It has a lot of slides, but I'll go very quickly through them. So could you please share? Yes, thank you, Luca. So I called my presentation Made in Switzerland, Found in Kremlin War Machine. And I will explain you first before we move to what exactly we found made in Switzerland in Russian weapons. I'll explain you briefly why are we doing this and who we are. Next slide, please. So essentially, I'm leading NGO in Ukraine. It works in the field of national security and defense. We were part of Transparency International Defense and Security, and together with their assistance, we established a separate NGO, and we work ever since we are recognized in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So because of Russian full-scale invasion, NAKO, on top of our regular work where we were studying defense procurement violations and corruption and export control violations, we focused specifically on answering their question, how come that despite sanctions, the Western technology is ending up in Russian weapon, and how do we stop it during full-scale war? Next slide, please. And in order to do that, we are now coordinating multiple global platforms, such as ICV, Ukrainian Center for International Center for Ukrainian Victory. I am the member of their steering committee of Business for Ukraine. It's a global coalition of think tanks and NGOs working on corporate complicity. in Russian war and looking how businesses can stop contributing to the war, including those businesses, of course, who supply critical tech. Also, we managed to establish civil society council on sanctions at the president office, and we coordinate directly with Zelensky office on these matters. And specifically, like I said, we look at weapons, while other members of their groups here that we participate in, they look at sanctions on oil, gas, and on chemicals, on, in general, financial sector sanctions, banking, SWIFT, all these kind of things. But we particularly work on with weapon debris that is here on Ukrainian territory. Then we identify different microchips, study custom declarations through OSINT, and then we do advocacy and communication after we publish the research. Next slide. So we have so far published 6 big research publications. They are on our website. As you can see, these are different weapons analyzed, different patterns analyzed, supply chains for drones, for missiles, for glide bombs. Next slide, please. We not only publish the research that not so many people read usually, but we, of course, do global communication. We very active on a daily basis, commenting on those topics to global media, and write op-eds and give interviews and so on, because we try to raise awareness about this topic. Next slide, please. On top of course, regular communication activity, we travel internationally. We've been to like a lot of European trips, a lot of trips to North America, to Asia, in order to also talk to policymakers and to businesses, to companies about tightening sanctions on Russia in the field of critical tech. Next slide, please. Our recent invention, I would say, is that we started bringing weapons and microelectronics to different countries. This, for example, last year, we had a big big conference on sanctions in The Hague, organized together with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where there were different governments invited and different companies invited. And we had the exhibition there of microelectronics found in Russian weapons. Some were made in the Netherlands, some were made in the US, and some were made, of course, in Switzerland. Next slide. That's example, for example, how we do press conferences when we found debris of the North Korean missile. It had actually microelectronics from Western countries, from Great Britain, the Netherlands, Japan, United States, and we were explaining that because it was kind of unexpected. Next slide, please. As of now, we have analyzed 30 samples of weapons and military equipment from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea. Mostly those weapons are high precision munitions, such as missiles, drones, and glide bombs. And we identified over 2,000 microelectronics. And we, based on this research, submit our findings to their government bodies in the European Union, in the UK, in the US. And those bodies were including Russian and foreign entities to their sanction lists. Next slide, please. Sorry. For some reason. What about Switzerland? Well, Switzerland is unfortunately the biggest manufacturer of microelectronics on European continent when it comes to Russian weapon. So in all Russian weapon, when we look at Western tech, we see that number one Western country is United States, and number two country is Switzerland. And Switzerland is in Europe, so like say Switzerland is a leader in Europe when it comes to giving Russia critical tech for weapons. And we found Swiss microelectronics at least in 103 pieces of weapon and equipment. We found 347 Swiss components from 11 Swiss manufacturers. Next slide, please. Those weapons where we found Swiss electronics, they include their T-72B3 tank, Shahed 136. They also include a KM-24 missile. That's the Korean, by the way. It also includes Iskander K missile. It includes the cruise missile H-101 and Kinjal missile as well. Those are weapons, so that you understand, if you don't work with weapons, they are highly critical weapons, especially the ones which are their weapons that hit from the air, because they are the ones which are most commonly used against Ukraine and the most with most devastating effect. Next slide. So what kind of components are from Switzerland? So these are usually electronic integrated circuits. These are electrical transformers, diodes, transistors, and photosensitive semiconductor devices. And all of those components are supposed to be under export controls. Next slide, please. Well, their example, for example, we were looking we were trying to answer question. As you know, there is list put by the sanction global coalition, by US, by EU and its partners in response to Russia's war. There is a list of so-called common high priority list. It's a list of equipment which should be under export control and should not end up in Russian weapon. But unfortunately, in their fighter jet components that we analyzed, 50% of those components were from this list. So they ended up in Russia, despite the fact they were already on the radar of the global sanction coalition. Next slide, please. So who are the top Swiss manufacturers that end up in Russian weapon? It's ST Microelectronics, it's U-Blocks, and it's Traco Power. As you can see, their biggest one is ST Microelectronics, 210 components, U-Blocks 42, and Traco Power 31. Next slide, please. So this ST Microelectronics, you can see their examples of microcontrollers that we found in Russian weapon that were manufactured by this Swiss company. And they were found in their cruise missile KN-59. They were found in S-8000 missile. They were found in Shahed drone. They were found in Tornado multiple launch rocket system. And also they are used a lot in different FPV drones, which are used for surveillance. Next slide, please. When it comes to the second most common company, u-blox, these are different modules such as GPS module and GNSS module. Those were found in this particular drones that use for surveillance, so-called SuperCam UAV. Also, there were other GPS modules of this company. They were found in actually glide bombs. Glide bombs actually are very damaging weapons because they are they were invented by Russia after full-scale war began, and basically they took their regular Soviet-style dumb bomb and they attached this sensitive technology to it, and they made it into a little like plane, essentially, that can glide after it's launched up to 12, 20 kilometers and hit the target. So it became very damaging for Ukrainian front line and for the cities that are located closer to their to the battlefield. And also u-blox is in Shahed drone. They're actually the new drone, Shahed 238. It's a very damaging new kind of drone. And unfortunately, Swiss component is also there. Next slide. When it comes to the third company, Traco Power, we found the DC converter, and it is in Iskander ballistic missile, and it is also in Caliber ballistic missile. As I should not explain to you, probably, that ballistic missile is very dangerous and very deadly weapon, very expensive, and it relies on this particular Swiss tech. Plus, also Traco Power supplies Kinjal hypersonic missile. Maybe you heard about Kinjal in the media. Russia is very proud of it because, yes, it's very hard to intercept Kinjal, and their converter from Traco Power is also in Kinjal. There is these particular missiles are highly, highly deadly and highly dangerous. And there was, as you know, we use Patriot systems from the United States, which is considered to be one of the best air defense systems in the world. But per publication from Financial Times of 2 days ago, there are already signs and some sources informed Financial Times that these particular missiles were modernized in a way that they can, Patriot missiles, Patriot system cannot intercept those 3 missiles anymore. Next slide. So basically, I will wrap up here. What can we do with all this information? Why is it happening like this, and why can we not stop it? We ask for proper investigation of those supply chain. We ask to ensure consistency of sanctions. What do I mean by consistency? I mean that all sanctioned jurisdictions have different sanctioning mechanisms, and for example, Switzerland has its own sanctioning legal mechanism, and sometimes it's not in line with US, not in line with EU and British and Russia using those loopholes. We also asked to monitor the compliance with their sanctions and export control restrictions, that there are bodies who make sure that there is compliance, because restrictions are there, but sometimes nobody follows those restrictions, and people who watch it, sometimes we see those situations. We also recommend encouraging businesses to establish better compliance and know your client systems. We even communicated with the CEO of uBlocks once. They can, if they want to invest in knowing their client and stop selling to Russia, it just costs money, and they need to hire more people and use AI and other advanced methods. Also, we think that it's not enough authorities responsible for sanction and export control. This is like a new job for some people, because before Russian invasion, there were very few people who did this kind of work, but now governments need more people. And sometimes governments, they want to save money and are not hiring enough people. Also, we want more mechanisms for information exchange with governments and civil society groups. For example, a group like ours, we exchange already information with Ukrainian government all the time, and we kind of essentially in one group with them, but we don't have such easy access to other governments, including to Swiss government. And of course, we work on investigating and targeting intermediaries involved in sanction violation. And we also basically study those supply chains. In this presentation, I did not talk about the supply chain, how these components ended up in Russia, but you can learn it if you show the next slide, Luca, then you can learn about it from our site, because there is very comprehensive research about supply chains. I can tell you just in a nutshell. Of course, they go through third countries, and the top countries are China, Hong Kong, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, those countries. And essentially, even with those intermediaries, it's possible to track where those components are going. I will wrap up here. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Olena, for the very interesting presentation. I stopped sharing the screen. You should not see it anymore now. But thank you very much. It was very interesting, and also the work you do at your NGO is a very good work. In the presentation is interesting. I have so many questions, but I'll wait. I will not be able to ask them all, but I'll wait to the Q&A sessions at the end. And also, I remember the others. If you have questions, just write them down, and we'll address them at the end. So now I let the floor to Kire and Itze for the presentation. So maybe you can share your screen. Let's see if it works.
Yes.
Yes, we can see your
screen. I hope you can see the presentation, right?
Yeah, it's not full screen yet, but we can see it. Now it is. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lucas. Yes, very interesting presentation by our colleague Olena. As you know, the title of our presentation is Policing Without Borders, Regional Responses to Illicit Trade on the Balkan Route. I will present this topic together with my colleague, Itze. I'm assistant professor at the Faculty of Security in Skopje, and Itze is a full professor at the law faculty in Kičevo. Why this topic? Why Balkan route? We are exploring this issue for some time, and we concluded that still the Balkan route remains a critical corridor for illicit trade, facilitating the movements of drugs, weapons, human trafficking across multiple borders. As the route evolves, illicit trade networks operating here in the countries along the Balkan route become increasingly dynamic, shifting their modus operandi to adapt to changes in political landscapes, enforcement strategies, and technological developments. But also the law enforcement and the police organizations from the countries along the Balkan route need to also adapt their strategies, their police operations, investigations, and so on, in order to to successfully detect and prosecute this type of illicit trade across the Balkan route. This presentation will explore the complex dynamics on the Balkan route, as I mentioned, focusing first of all on the operational challenges. What are the factors that facilitate the illicit trade here, but also the law enforcement responses through the cross-border police cooperation. So we will share something about the law enforcement initiatives and also the cooperation institutions responsible and working here on this in this field, on this topic. But now I will give the floor to my colleague Izilevski to introduce you to the Balkan route and the factors and so on, and then I will get back to rejoin to continue with the cross-border cooperation. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Kire. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar at the Cost Action GLITSS. In my part of the presentation, I will address some aspects of the significance of the Balkan route, but first some words about our country and the neighborhood in order to better understand what is behind it. Here I would like to show you the general direction of the route. Historically, the Balkans have served as a geographic bridge between Asia and Europe. As such, the Balkan Peninsula has been used by criminal groups as a transit corridor for the trafficking and smuggling of various kinds of drugs and weapons to Europe. In spite of these centuries-old activities, the phenomena of organized crime in the Balkans has evolved in the contemporary context of this regional plague only during the last decades of the 20th century. Criminal organizations exploit the region's complex geopolitical landscape and porous borders to transport illegal goods and people across multiple countries. The adaptability of this network poses significant challenges to regional security and necessitates cross-border cooperation among law enforcement agencies. The Balkan route has long been a critical corridor for illicit trade, facilitating the trafficking of goods, narcotics, arms, and people across Europe. There is an interplay of socioeconomic disparities, political instability, weak institutional governance, cultural dynamics, and local economics conditions that drive participation in illicit markets. Additionally, there are structural barriers to enforcement, including corruption, jurisdictional challenges, and limited regional cooperation. Addressing this issue requires a comprehensive approach that considers both the root causes and structural barriers to effective law enforcement. Since the 1990s, the Balkan route has been the most significant trafficking path for supplying illegal opiates, particularly heroin, from Afghanistan to Western and Central Europe. The route begins in Afghanistan and passes through Iran and Turkey. The Balkan route splits into three main branches. The northern branch crosses southeastern Europe through Bulgaria and Romania, continue to Western and Central Europe. The western branch passes through Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia, and North Macedonia, eventually reaching Western and Central Europe. And the southern branch leads into the European Union by moving from Turkey to Greece and then to Italy. In the literature, as well as police circuits, several terms are used for this route, including Balkan Corridor, Western Balkan route, and Balkan Circuit, often to describe a transit zone marked by blurred entry and exit points. The Republic of North Macedonia has a specific geostrategic and geopolitical central location on the Balkan Peninsula, surrounded by a country with different cultures, traditions, historical backgrounds, religion, experience, etc. On the Balkan Peninsula, some of the countries shown on this slide are members of the European Union, namely Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Romania, and Slovenia. They're all NATO member states, including Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. The countries that are not part of the EU belong to Western Balkan region, or WB6, because it has 6 countries. The Western Balkans was one of the regions that experienced the most difficult transition, because this process was accompanied by bilateral and multilateral conflict, a local and regional war, and political and ethnic clashes. Consequently, the Balkans were politically fragmented on its map as well, and the fragmentation of the Balkans came for many historical, political, economic, geopolitical, and strategic reasons. This process also had consequences for the integration process of this region. The international community has actively intervened in the Balkans, namely in the conflict period in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. The Western Balkans have faced significant socioeconomic challenges, including high unemployment rates, poverty, and limited economic opportunities. These conditions create a fertile ground for illicit activities, as individuals may resort to smuggling and trafficking as alternative means of income. Political instability further exacerbates the situation, undermining the rule of law and enabling criminal networks to operate with relative impunity. Illicit trade networks along the Balkan route are highly adaptive, constantly evolving in response to political shifts, enforcement measures, and technological advancement. Criminal organizations modify their routes, trafficking methods, and operational structures to evade detection and exploit gaps in border security. Changes in political landscape, such as new EU policy or bilateral agreements, often lead to the rerouting of smuggling operations. Similarly, enhancing law enforcement efforts push traffickers to adopt more sophisticated concealment techniques, encrypted communication, and cyber-enabled trafficking methods. The adaptability of these networks make them particularly resilient, posing an ongoing challenges for authorities and highlighting the need for flexible and coordinated cross-border responses. Efforts to combat illicit trade along the Balkan route face several structural barriers that complicate enforcement and allow criminal networks to thrive. Corruption within governmental and law enforcement institutions remains a significant obstacle, undermining anti-trafficking initiatives and fostering an environment where illicit activities can flourish with impunity. Jurisdictional challenges arise from the transnational nature of illicit trade, necessitating effective cooperation among countries with varying legal systems, investigative procedure, and enforcement capabilities. These discrepancies hinder coordinated response and delay critical action against trafficking networks. Furthermore, limited regional cooperation exacerbates these challenges as fragmented and inconsistent approaches fail to address the interconnected and adaptive nature of illicit trade network, and the lack of unified strategies and comprehensive information sharing among Balkan countries not only weakness enforcement efforts, but also enable traffickers to exploit legal and operational loopholes, perpetuating the cycle of illicit trade across the region. I will stop here, and I would like to ask my colleague Kire to explain more about cross-border cooperation and enforcement mechanism in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ice. I hope you can hear me well. Here I will continue with the cross-border cooperation along the Balkan route, but first of all, I would like to give some considerations about this. International law enforcement cooperation is structured through a layered framework of international, regional, and bilateral agreements, and also instruments, initiatives, and so on. At the international level, organizations such as the United Nations, the Council of Europe, the European Union provide different types of legal acts like conventions, directives, and strategies that set common standards and obligations for the states. These are complemented by regional initiatives tailored to specific geographical or security contexts, which promote coordination among neighboring countries. At the same time, bilateral agreements between individual states offer more flexible and targeted mechanisms to address immediate cross-border challenges. Together, these instruments create the legal and operational foundations to effective cooperation against transnational crime along the Balkan route. On this slide, I would like to show you most of the international and regional organizations which play a central key role in strengthening cross-border cooperation along the Balkan route. First of all, we can say something about the Interpol, Europol, and Eurojust, which are very big players that provide global and EU-level platforms for intelligence exchange, operational support, law enforcement cooperation, and judicial cooperation as well. Then we have EU-LISA, which supports the interoperability of large-scale EU information systems, crucial for border management. And then at the regional level, for example, we have SEPCA, the Southeast Europe Police Chiefs Association, then SELEC, Southeast European Law Enforcement Center, SIPAC, Southeastern European Prosecutors Advisory Group, which is somehow part of the SELEC, and PCCC, Police Cooperation Convention for Southeast Europe. And all of this foster police and prosecutorial cooperation among Southeast European countries. Complementing these efforts, there are also some other initiatives like RCC, or Regional Cooperation Council, then CISAC, Southeastern and Eastern Europe Clearing House for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons, and IISG, which is somehow like an initiative for project, Integrative Internal Security Governance, and all of them promote broader regional security cooperation, arms control, and integrated responses to organized crime. Together, these institutions form a comprehensive network for fight against transnational crime in the Western Balkans. For the purposes of cross-border cooperation in practice, or insights from the Balkan route, here I would like to briefly present you the work of SELEC, Southeast European Law Enforcement Center, that facilitate the secure exchange of information among its member states to support investigations into serious and organized crime. Through its operational center unit, it provides 24/7 support, coordination, and communication channels for cross-border cases, but also, in addition, has its own network or instruments, let's say, for exchanges of information, intelligence exchange, sharing information among the countries, but also operates 8 specialized task forces on issues such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, and financial crime, bringing together experts from across the region to share intelligence, as I mentioned, to coordinate actions, to lead joint investigations, for example, and so on. Together, these mechanisms make SELEC a central hub for regional law enforcement cooperation. For this presentation, we compiled this chart based on the information publicly available on SELEC website. It shows the number of joint investigations led by SELEC from 2013 to 2025. And you can see the maximum number was 10 operations or investigations in 2017. And it ranks from 2 to 10 joint investigations per year. This number of cross-border investigations along the Balkan route has fluctuated over the years, as we can see, reflecting the dynamic nature of transnational crime and shifting law enforcement priorities. These trends also suggest that operations vary in scale and intensity depending on emerging threats, available resources, and strategic focus. These are some of the joint investigations led by SELEC. For example, you can see some of the operations in 2025 connected with smuggling of cigarettes, dismantling organized crime groups with trafficking in human beings, smuggling schemes, and so on. In 2024, there were 5 big joint investigations related to computer frauds, migrant smuggling, smuggling of cultural heritage objects, and in 2023 also there were 4 investigations also related to different types of products like tobacco. What we have also migrants, arms, and so on. All these cases shows the SELEC role in facilitating and coordinating these joint investigations, the fostering of regional cooperation, and also enhancing the effectiveness of law enforcement efforts. We also tried to show here the key takeaways from all these operations led by SELEC. You can see the advantages, the disadvantages or challenges, but also the lessons learned, observations from it. For example, diversity of criminal activities, effectiveness of multilateral cooperation, capacity building for the region, continuity and sustainability, emerging threats and adaptation. All these are somehow challenges when it comes to the operations. And as I mentioned, because the illicit trade networks, they are adapting their tactics, their strategies, and so on. So also the law enforcement agencies needs to work on this. Here I would like to show you that also the European Union is actively involved in combating different types of illicit activities like illegal trafficking, organized crime, and so on, which means that also use is interesting in strengthening the region here and also fighting against different types of illicit trade and illicit activities. But also, despite efforts to strengthen cross-border police collaboration, several challenges hinder the effectiveness of joint operations against illicit trade networks along the Balkan route. For example, the legal barriers, because there are many different countries, so there are differences in national laws, judicial procedures, and so on. The political constraints like bilateral tensions between the countries, lack of trust among the states, shifting political priorities. Then technological limitations, disparities in digital infrastructure, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and operational challenges like limited resources, understaffed law enforcement agencies. It was also mentioned in the previous presentation, and inadequate training. All this affects the successful cross-border cooperation here in this area. And as a last slide, effectively addressing illicit trade along the Balkan route requires an approach that strengthens institutional capacities, promotes regional cooperation, invests in economic development, fostering cross-border collaboration through information sharing and joint operations, implementing anti-corruption measures, and enhancing law enforcement efforts. Also, economic initiatives that create legitimate employment opportunities coupled with community engagement and adoption of advanced technologies. All this can somehow help to effectively address illicit trade and to dismantle all these illicit trade networks that are highly adaptive and dynamic. Presentation. I hope it was clear, and if you're interested in some of these aspects, we can discuss later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kire and Itze, for a very insightful presentation. And it was very clear on this Balkan trade route. I also have questions for your presentation. So thank you very much for this. We'll try to keep it within the time limits we proposed, so that if you planned something else, we don't extend the webinar too much. But I might maybe start with one question first to Olena. Then I'll ask one quick question also to Kire and Itze, and then I'll let the floor to you guys for other questions. Maybe just Olena to start. So again, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very insightful. I think you're doing also you have a very important mission as part of your NGO. So thank you. I was wondering, you mentioned it at the end about the supply chains. I had I didn't check on your website because I saw you put some QR code at the end. I was wondering about the role of the intermediaries in the presence of those components. And this also asks questions about responsibility. Where do you put the responsibility? Because obviously exports controls to some point are responsible on which component should be exported to which country, to which customer. But then you mentioned this is also a big stake, is how should we monitor the intermediaries? And how do you have any, like, based on your experience, it's not magical solution, but any way we could approach this problem regarding this monitoring of the supply chain, which I think is a very important part of the story.
Yeah, sure. Do you hear me okay right now?
Yes.
Yeah. There are different opinions about where we should place responsibility. And my opinion is that it should be with their manufacturer. It should be with the source, because they should be responsible for not selling their products to basically genocidal, aggressive regimes that kill children and women here in Ukraine in mass numbers. They know what's going on in Ukraine. They know what are the sanctions that were introduced due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And they should invest money in making sure that they are not contributing to this invasion. However, of course, there are multiple layers of responsibility, not just those companies. So those companies, I believe that there should be strict fines. There should be very strict responsibility for those companies. However, right now, there is no such responsibility. And because of that, those companies essentially don't invest in compliance, in know your client. But where we have responsibility right now, it's, as you know, there is the EU directive on criminalization of sanction evasion. And basically, we already had in European Union a lot of arrests related to those companies, people who help Russia acquire all these sanctioned items. In the Netherlands, for example, there was arrest of a person. We even met this person who was helping Russia acquire Dutch microchips. Yeah, he was just buying it from their Dutch manufacturer. Then he was shipping it and to a third country. Sometimes even it's not even shipped to a third country. Sometimes it's shipped to multiple countries, but on paper. But in reality, like it's shipped to less countries. So there are like 3-4 layers in this supply chain, and but those people who facilitate, they know what they are doing, and they are being now arrested in the United States. They're being arrested in Europe. So this is good, but companies should be more compliant. And also responsibility is on the governments in my opinion, because governments can do so much more to create rules under which those companies, those individuals and businesses not function so free. The governments remain very liberal about businesses. They don't want to restrict business, and they treat those critical components that go to ballistic missiles just as a business, and they don't treat it. They do not treat it as a national security.
Thank you very much for your complete answer. I would have many more to ask, but I'll ask a quick question to Kira and Itze, and then I'll let the floor to other questions. So thank you also, Kira and Itze, for the presentation. Very interesting. So my question is is more of a general one, but I was wondering, you were mentioning all this cooperation at different levels to try to tackle this illicit flow of goods through the Balkan route. I was wondering during your presentation about the effectiveness of this cooperation. So I know this is not an easy answer, but I know also that these organized groups, criminal groups, are very adaptable, and so I was wondering if maybe this cooperation on enforcement to try to tackle this problem. Do you see any like change in the route of the Balkan routes, or like has this cooperation been effective some way, or do you see any change in this flow of illicit goods within the Balkan route, or maybe another route that is used by those criminal organizations?
Yes, thanks a lot for the question. Yes, indeed, it's very, very hard to find and to evaluate the successfulness of this regional cooperation, cross-border cooperation. Recently, Frontex has one report in which it says that for the smuggling of migrants, but also the migrants coming from Africa, especially, they are using the Mediterranean route, but still the Balkan route remains the second one, which is the biggest one after the Mediterranean route. But this is only about the smuggling of migrants, for example, and the flow of the migrants by themselves. Regarding the other types of illicit trade, other types of illegal trafficking, still the Balkan route is used for this because of the geostrategical position, mostly because of the geographical position and so on. But also depends on the goods and the values. You know, for some of them, it is used, for example, for the drugs. The drugs are coming from Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey, and then they goes through the Balkan route, reaching out to Central and Western Europe. But also there are some other goods that are coming the other way, for example, like the medicaments, for example, sometimes tobacco, because in Turkey, for example, the electronic cigarettes are forbidden, so they're not allowed. So most of these cigarettes are coming from the other countries, from the Balkan countries and so on, and they're going to Turkey. So this route is not one direction only. Yes, and also for the weapons, for example, for the trafficking in arms, weapons, and ammunition, there is no direct, how to say, exact route, because it depends on moving from one to another country, and it's not always following the same route. And it is mostly happening around the Balkan countries by themselves. And the factors here are very different. The porous borders between the countries, as I mentioned, the lack of trust among the countries and so on. So that's why with the help of the bigger organizations like Interpol, Europol, and now these regional organizations, which we can divide it somehow on the macro, meso, and micro level. When we're discussing about the Interpol, also Europol and Eurojust, we are discussing on macro level. When we are discussing about these regional initiatives here in the Balkan route, like SELEC, PCC, and so on. We are dealing with on a meso level, on the middle level, and also when we're discussing about the bilateral agreements between the countries, we are discussing about the micro level or micro level cooperation among the countries. So yeah, maybe it will be interesting to go deeper into these issues in our next research or study about this topic. Thanks.
Thank you very much for both for your answers. Now I let the floor to the others for questions. So if you wanna use this very nice opportunity to ask questions to regarding those very interesting presentation, go ahead. I see Cameron. You have a question.
First, I just wanted to acknowledge that it's 1 o'clock CET. So if any of the participants or speakers need to head out, that's totally fine. Otherwise, we will ask a few more questions, I think. One question I have for Olena is, what are some of the challenges to obtaining more samples? So you mentioned you obtained a few dozen samples over the course of the last few years. What's stopping your organization from being able to obtain more?
Short answer, it's sometimes when the weapon explodes, usually the weapon explodes and there is a debris, we obtain only partial information. But otherwise, believe me, we have no challenges because Russia is throwing at us anything Russia has. So we have plenty of samples here, even to the extent that now we asked Ukrainian government to give us the full 4-meter tall black Shahed drone, which we can take to Europe just to show people how deadly this weapon is and how big it is. So we'll take it to The Hague, to Paris. We can take it to Switzerland if you'd like, because it has Swiss components too.
Thank you. And I also had one question for Kira. What happens when an organization like SELEC has a successful investigation? Is there a follow-up done to measure the long-term effects of the investigation?
Well, as I mentioned, SELEC is it works as a regional hub for cooperation among the countries. And it's good because they have also operational center in their HQ and so on. So they have liaison officers. So the cooperation is, I can say that it's very well established. And if we see all these joint investigations and operations that they led in the last couple of years, we can see that they have continuity in their work. And also we can see that they work in, because they have, as I mentioned, 8 specialized task forces for different types of forms of illicit trade and also other types of crimes, mostly about the organized crime. We can see that they have a success in, and they're not focused only on one type of crime, but different types of crimes. It's good that they also have their meetings inside the organizations. We don't have access to these types of meetings or conclusions, but I can see that they have a very good mechanisms within the organization and within the countries. So this cooperation is really a good example and good successful story from this region, which can maybe be copied to other regions, not only in Europe, but maybe in the world. But also everything depends on the regional context, on the political situations and so on. Here, the geostrategical position and the political context on the Balkans is, as we know how it is, with all these different countries, mixed countries. Some of them are in EU, some of them in NATO, some of them are aspiring to join EU and NATO. So not all of them are aligned with their standards, legislation, and so on. So far, I see that SELEC is very good on very good road to continue this because we can see the sustainability, but also the other organizations are very good as well. For example, PCCC, it's a Police Cooperation Convention, but it has also like additional protocols that also enables the cross-border cooperation among the countries. All in all, we can see some progress in dismantling these types of illicit trade networks along the Balkan route.
Great. Thank you both so much. I enjoyed the presentations.
Thank you.
Is there any more question? Maybe one last question for presenters. Well, if I don't see in the chat, there shouldn't be shouldn't be any question there.
We did just get one question come in.
I see just one question that unfortunately I cannot read. Maybe Olena, your microphone is muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I read the question. Like a person is trying to clarify whether those components are dual use or they are the common use. So essentially, they are considered, yes, like dual use kind of products, but they are still kind of common, even though they are used, technically they are classified as common. However, they are on a special list, which is created by, like I said, EU, US, UK, they are jointly created this list, which is called Common High Priority List. This is the list of things that usually end up in weapon, even though technically they can be used in some other very sophisticated equipment. But because of this war, it's clear that these are the things that Russia is seeking all over the world and buying. And this list is supposed to be controlled. But it is not controlled, as we saw, because 50% of what we found is from that exact list.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You wanted to add something? Olena, sorry.
No, thank you very much for this webinar and for raising this topic. And I hope that, you know, we can collaborate with somebody in Switzerland to stop this, because Switzerland is proud about its neutrality. However, it's very ironic that a country that sticks to neutrality is the biggest supplier for Russian weapon, which is killing us.
This would be very interesting to do, obviously, because there's a lot of very ethical questions there, and some research should be done on this. So thank you very much for bringing the topic. Thank you everyone for having participated to this webinar. As we mentioned at the beginning, this webinar has been recorded, so it's going to be published on the GLITSS website, but also on the YouTube channel of the GLITSS to reach a broader audience. So again, thank you very much for your participation. I really enjoyed the both presentations. They were very interesting, and yeah, thank you for everything and have a good day.